Hi, I'm Kate and welcome to Music Production Nerds. In this video, we're going to show you how to make a basic drum loop using your sample collection or any of the pre-made samples that are already in your DAW. With a couple of easy tips and tricks, you'll be able to create a super groovy beat with virtually anything just by following these simple patterns. I'll also show how you can expand upon these basic patterns to add a little more flavor into your mix. Let's get right into it. So I think it's important to note that different genres of music are going to have different typical drum loop structures, just based on how they're produced. But for our demonstration, I'm going to be focusing on mainly like a pop electronic type structure. You can make your own loop using samples that you already have in your DAW from your sample library. You could use a drum plugin, and if you want to learn more about those, we'll share a link in the description. Or you could even make samples just using audio recordings from scratch. And if you want to learn how to do that in the future, go ahead and give this a video a like so we know to make it. So basically what a drum loop is a combination of different percussive instruments, all centered in a specific time frame. Typically a drum loop is going to be 1 bar, 2 bar, 4 bar, and what people mean by bars is they just mean a collection of beats or a collection of measures. So I find it helpful to break down each drum loop by the individual percussion instruments so that you're able to create them. On a very basic level, you're always going to have 3 things in a drum loop. You're going to have a kick, you're going to have a snare or a snap, this can also be a clap, and you're going to have a hi-hat or a shaker sound. Keep in mind that the placement of all these different components isn't necessarily rigid, but having a basic understanding of where they go, depending on your genre, can be pretty helpful. So one of the best things to have on your side while you're creating loops is the looping function of your DAW. Ableton Live makes this really easy since a lot of times this DAW is used for live performances where you will be looping different sections. But in Ableton, the control is Control or Command L on Mac. And all it will do is this bar up here will just repeat itself whenever it gets to the end of the loop or section of time you designate. You can also alter it and adjust it by how many bars you want. So for our demonstration, I'm going to create a 4-bar loop. And you can tell that it's 4 bars because I have 4 of these different rectangles next to each other. My grid right now is also set to 1 bar. So the grid basically just tells you what kind of beat you're designating with each rectangle. Another way you can tell how many bars you're using is by turning on your tempo feature, listening. And every time you'll hear a different click, that means you're on beat 1 or at the beginning of a new bar. So you can see that the first beat of each bar sounds a little different than the other beats. Anyway, once you have your looping feature figured out, you want to think about your kick. Or this could be a bass sound. It's generally just something that resides in the low frequency range. So generally when we're thinking about kicks in a pop drum loop, we're focusing on beats 1 and 3. Just like our tempo marker, the kick helps us know when we're going to a different section, a different measure. It helps us really hold down the central beat of our drum loops. So it's imperative that we have something like this to really solidify the groove of our drum loop. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pick out one of my many kicks. I have a ton of samples, but you know, your DAW should have a bunch of stock samples that come with it and a couple of kick options for you to pick from. So I'm gonna go with this one, why not? All right, and right now my grid is set to 1 bar, but I want it on beats 1 and 3. So I'm gonna click the quarter note or 1/4 grid. And then I can just count. So I have 4 beats here. 1, 2, 3, 4 based on the rectangles, okay, before I get to my next bar. And I want it on beats 1 and 3, so I'm gonna just skip the second one here because we have 1, beat 2, beat 3. All right. And there we go. We have our kick on beats 1 and 3. I'm just going to extend that out to each bar. Right? All right. There we go. And sometimes you'll even see kicks on every beat. So the kick kind of serves as the pulse of your loop. It's really up to you where you want to place it, but generally speaking, it's helpful to have a kick on beat 1 at the very least. Next, we have the snare, snap, or clapping sound. Now this sound will usually come on beats 2 and beats 4. It doesn't matter if you also have a kick on beat 2 and beat 4, that's fine. But this is where things will start to feel a little more like a loop, a little more groovy, just by adding in a simple clap. So, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and add a snap today, why not? Let's see. All right, I like this one. So I'm gonna put it on beats 2 and 4. Just fill that out. Okay, sounds okay. Let me just add a little reverb. Okay, we're getting there. And you know what? I changed my mind. Based on my snap and how it's placed, I kind of want my kick on beats 1 through 4 to give it more of a pulse. So you have a very basic foundation of a beat here. And for some people, making a song, especially, you know, very simplified pop, this is more than enough. All right, and then the final thing that you might want to add to your basic drum loop to add a little more interest and a little more groove is a hi-hat or a shaker. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up a hat. Let's see. That's fine. So with hats and shakers, they typically go on every other 8th beat. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the 1/8 grid. And if you guys are ever wondering about what's an 1/8 note, what's a quarter note, what does that really mean in the context of music theory, go ahead and give this video a like and we'll know to inform you guys of that in the future. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select the 1/8 grid, and I'm gonna put my hat that I selected on every other little rectangle I have here. All right, and I'm just gonna go ahead and duplicate that out. All right, and let's see how that sounds with the hat. So as you can see, you know, very, you know, boots and cats, but it works. And just like that, you have a basic drum loop that you can use as the foundation of your song. So once you have your basic foundation, you can make it a little more interesting or keep it as it is. But I'm going to show you a couple techniques that I use to add a little interest to my loops. All right, so one technique that I like to use is reversing samples in order to lead into a sample that you're trying to emphasize. I know that's a mouthful, but it'll make sense when I do it in actuality. So you can use any sound to do this technique. Sometimes I feel like it works best with cymbal samples. So let me go ahead and pull up a cymbal. Something like this is perfect. So in this example, I really want to elevate my snap sample here, which we have on 2 and 4, right? So what I'm gonna do with my cymbal, which originally sounds like this, is I'm gonna make it a little shorter so it fits properly in our grid. All right, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and reverse it, just like that. And I'm gonna place it leading into our snap. And you can see just by the waveform how it kind of leads into the next sound. But then let's go ahead and fill this out in our loop so that you can see exactly how that sounds in context. All right, so this is without. All right, and this is with. So So it adds a little interest to the sample that you're trying to emphasize. Another technique I like to use is just simply doubling my samples if I want a bit more emphasis. So I just went ahead and duplicated my snap track. It sounds a lot more powerful. Or what I could even do is layer my snap or my clap or whatever I have with another snap, snare, or different sound, just to give it a little more power. So let me just go ahead and layer it with a different snap, and we'll see how it sounds. This one's fine. Perfect. Again on beats 2 and 4. And I already have my reverb, which I really appreciate on a snap or snare sound. And so it has a lot more power. All right, and the last thing that I want to talk about in regards to drum loop is thinking about the transition. So typically this would happen at the end of your bar loop. Right now, I have a 4-bar loop, so in the 4th bar is where I'm gonna think about doing something a little bit different with my percussion, just to add some interest and successfully transition the loop to the following loop. So one really easy way to do this is to take your hi-hat or shaker sound and just, duplicate it a couple more times. So I'm just gonna add in some extra 16th notes. Okay. And there you go. You'll see how it flows. I'm gonna play it from the middle here, and you'll see how it flows back to the beginning of the loop just by adding in a couple extra hats. All right. But as you can see, sometimes this is referred to as throwing the listener a bone or whatever, but just adding in a little extra flair at the end of your bar can be very helpful. Once you have your loop, you can go ahead and continue to create in your session, or you can export your loop and then save it in your sample folder and use that on its own for later. Sometimes it can be helpful just to spend a day making drum loops. You can also learn a lot from pre-made loops. I have some loops in here myself, and one thing that you can do is just listen to your loop. Let me find, I think this is a drum loop. All right. And you can even bring it into your DAW. Okay, it looks like this is a 2-bar loop, and you can see where the different sounds are hitting. All right, so we have so this is a bit of a different groove, but we can see that our kick is still hitting on beat 1. Our hi-hats are in different places, but from different pre-made loops, you can use this as a template to create your own just by looking at where each instrument is hitting on the beat. You could also use a loop generator like the wonderful Acusonus Rhythm IQ, which we did a video review about earlier. If you want to check it out, the link will be in the description. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching the video. Please feel free to subscribe, like, and share if you learned something, and visit the website musicproductionnerds.com if you'd like to learn more music production tips, gear, and plugin guides. See you next time. Bye.